Now that we've been able to connect to our wallet, there are still a couple of things we want to be able to achieve in our Web3 service. The first thing we will add is how to get the chain that you're connected to. So we'll use the Web3 service to always be able to tell us which chain you're currently connected to. WAGMI call already gives us a function that we can always call to check which chain we are connected to. So it's called get network. So we can always get the current chain from any component by calling get network. So get network. Get network will return an object with a chain and a list of chains that you are allowed to also connect it to. So let's look at what the chain object gives us. The chain allows you to get the block explorer, all the contracts that are there, the fees. Usually we are more interested in the ID of the chain, which will be the chain ID. So that is 1, for example, for Ethereum mainnet, or 56 for BNB chain, and the likes. Then the name of the network, then the native currency of the network. If you are building a multi-chain application, it's easier for you to use this and get the native currency to display to the user. So if the user connects to the mainnet chain, then you can get the native currency from the chain and display Ethereum. If you connect, for example, to Polygon, then the native currency will return Matic. So your currency symbols needs to be configurable or to be flexible wherever you use it. And the RPC URLs, whether it's a testnet or not, and it gives you an unsupported flag that indicates whether you are supporting it or not. Now, the way that WAGMI core is set up, if you set it up correctly, then WAGMI core will be chain aware. It will always be chain aware, meaning that whenever you call any WAGMI method, and we are going to look at a lot of other WAGMI methods, you will realize that it will automatically use the currently connected chain. So you don't necessarily always have to pass in a chain ID. But let's assume you are building a multi-chain application, you are currently on the mainnet, and you want to display some other information to the user from another chain. Then you will need to specify a chain flag. Now, since we have a Web3 service, we're going to centralize some common fields that we'll need to use where Web3 is concerned. So we're going to add 2 more fields here, the chain ID, the currently connected chain, and the currently used wallet account. So you can always inject Web3 service into any component and into any further service, and you'll be able to get the chain ID and then the currently connected account. So this simplifies your integration. So let's add a chain ID here. So because we're using Angular, let's use observables, and we are using observables so that anytime the chain ID changes, automatically this chain ID will update, and then it will update everywhere you are using it. So we're going to create an observable. So a chain ID as used by WAGMI is a number. So we will initially set it to be undefined, because by the time we first run the application and it's not connected to any chain, it will be undefined, right? And then let's make this. Okay. Lastly, we are going to add a getter just to always help us get the recent value, the most recent value. And here, here we just return and that's it. So we are using a behavior subject here. A behavior subject will retain the most recent value and will allow us to set an initial value. So we'll do the same thing for accounts. So this will represent the wallet, the active wallet account. And an account, on the other hand, is a string. That's the address of the wallet. So okay, great. So all that remains is for us to set the chain and the account in the constructor. So in order to set the chain ID, we are going to wait a little and just wait a bit for things to settle down before we start setting the values. And then so we're going to leave maybe a timeout of about 300 milliseconds. After then, we can then come here, say get network. Now if chain and chain is unsupported, is false, then this dot chain ID dot next chain dot ID. So we'll do the same thing for the address. Now to get your address, you can get your address. WAGMI has a method called getAccount. It's just an helper method to get the current account, the currently connected wallet, and it will return the address of the wallet and its connected flag. So WAGMI has quite a number of methods that really you will find really helpful while doing your Web3 integration. So you can just check if this is connected, and then you can set at the address. But that's not all. Let's go to the WAGMI documentation page. Now, if you come here under actions, you will see quite a number of methods. So we already saw get network, which is an helper method for accessing network data, such as the currently connected chain. Then we also saw get account, which helps you to access the account data. You can see some of the return values, the address, if it's connected, if it's currently connecting, and then the status. Then, so we also have some methods. We have watch account. Now, while the get account helps you to get the currently connected account, the watch account allows you to subscribe to account changes. So each time that a user comes to your Web3 wallet, whichever one it is, and switches the account to another account, you can use watch account to subscribe to those changes and get the new account. The same thing with watch network. Watch network also allows you to subscribe to network changes. So each time the user comes to your Web3 wallet and switches the account, maybe from Ethereum to Arbitrum, then you can use the watch network to subscribe to those changes. So we're going to use those two methods now to make sure that our Web3 service updates the chain ID and the account whenever there are any changes that we're interested in. So let's start with the network again. So to do this, we just add watch network, right? And then we had our so it's expecting a network. We get the network. Let's call it network. Watch network. So we check if the network chain is defined, because there's no use if it's not defined, and then we check if it's supported also. So if it's supported, so if there's a valid network chain, then we update the chain ID to the network.chain, .chain.id. Else, we set the chain ID to undefined to let us know that we are currently not connected to any network. Okay, great. And then here, we also do watch account from WAGMI core. And then we pass in the account. Okay, so we also do some form of check. We check if you are currently connected to any account. If you are connected, we update the account. Just the address. And then, if not, we set the account to undefined. So again, if you are unfamiliar with RxJS and observables, you can check online. I'm sure you'll find a good tutorial on observables. So we have our watch network and watch account set up. And then we are almost done. Okay, so one last thing. Let's store a reference to that so that we don't. Let's reduce this to 200. I believe it should have settled by then. And now we are done. So we can use our Web3 service anywhere now. we go back to our app, the auction app, let me move that here. Already, you can see that the Connect Wallet displays the account, but it doesn't display the chain. So let's make it to display just the chain ID for now. So, yes. So save all. So you can see the chain ID displayed. I'm going to go ahead to switch the account to another chain ID, and you'll see that it will update. So we're now on the Arbitrum one, and you can see that the chain ID has updated, and I'll leave it as an assignment for you to figure out how you can change, instead of displaying the chain ID, display a chain name instead. Let's style this a little better. Okay, great. So in a multi-chain application, it's always good to display the current chain that the user is connected to, and then give the user an option to select to switch the chains. Now, if you are going to switch a chain, WAGMI has an action called switch network that helps you to switch a network from one chain to another. All you have to do is pass in the chain ID of the network that you want to switch to. However, not all wallet apps support programmatically switching this. So on wallet apps that don't support programmatically switching the network, your users can go to their wallet and switch the chain directly, and the chain will be updated on your app, right? But for apps that support it, let's add a network switcher somewhere here. Now, in order to add a network switcher, we're just going to add a select dropdown, and we'll populate it with the list of chains that we have, and then we'll add an ng change to it to react whenever the user switches or chooses a new network. So let's do that. Now, in order to do that, we're going to add a select okay. So let's bind it so that we can always get selected network, which we'll create. And we're going to add an ng change or a model change to track whenever that changes. Let's call that a switch network. So we just add a default. And then we are going to add a list of options that will be populated from all the chains that we support. So let's go ahead to add some fields that we need in our code end. So select a network. And switch network. So we need a list of all the networks. So let's call that network list. And we make that undefined for starters, but it's an array. So in our ng on init, we populate this network list. Now, if you are just saying ng on init for the first time, I'll advise that you go through an Angular lifecycle tutorial. Ng on init is called when the page has been loaded and is ready. So ng on init, we populate the network list, and the network list will be gotten from our Web3 service .chains. So that's one of the reasons why we created an array for this and stored it as a class variable. So this chains, remember, if you go to the Web3 service, this chains array stores a list of all the networks that we support. But we're not going to pass just the network list directly, or should we? Okay, let's leave it that way. So network list. So we can then use the network list to populate these options. So let's add an ng for. And then we'll bind the value to the chain ID. And the option will now be network.name. So we bind the value of this option to the chain ID, and we bind the other one to the name. So again, let's go to our chains. Let's be sure that the object, so it's ID and name. So we'll correct this. Instead of chain ID, it's ID and then the name. Okay, so class. Okay, so there are still a few errors that we need to sort out. ng model is not a known property of select. So let's update our modules. So in order to fix that error, we need to import the forms module. That's where the ng model comes from. So we'll have an import from Angular forms. for the forms module. Then go back here. Okay, so Angular has changed the, no? So cut previous. Okay, so this need to update switch network method, and then there's an error here. So network of network list, yes. So here we update our selected network to whichever new network is selected, and then we call switch network. Let's go to WAGMI.co to see the way to use switch network. So you pass in a chain ID, an object containing a chain ID. So switch network, let's import it. Okay, it's imported. Chain ID will now be the new network. .id, and this returns a promise. So let's make sure we do this. Let's save everything. Okay, so we're good to go. Let's look at our app to see what has changed. It's reloading, and we can see here, choose network, and then it shows the list of networks that we currently support. So we can switch to Polygon here. Okay. So you can switch to Polygon. Okay, there seems to be an error. Okay, so this should be this, because new network is the ID and not the whole chain object. So let's try that again. So chain ID is set to new network. So let's try that again. Yes, and you can see the request coming in to switch. So I'm going to cancel this, but that's a way you can build a network switcher. Now, Like I explained earlier, this is no longer a best practice. Best practice is to allow the user switch the network on their wallet directly instead of giving them a network switcher that allows you to programmatically switch the network. But if you want to go ahead to implement a network switcher, that is a way you can go ahead to implement one. So now that we've implemented a network switcher, one last thing we can do here is we can update the selected network to always show which network the user is connected to. So after the page has loaded, we can update selected network to whichever chain ID. Now remember that we waited in our set timeout, so let's do this. Okay. Let's delay a little for it to catch up. And then let's update our type to number. VS Code. Okay. And that's that. So great. So let's see that this works. Then I'll show you a better way of doing this. Yes, so automatically you can see that the network switcher shows the current network. But if I go ahead to change the network here now, and let's say I change back to mainnet, you can see that the chain ID has changed, but the currently selected chain is not updated, and which is one of the reasons why we use an observable for the chain ID. So instead of doing this, we could just subscribe to the chain ID, right? And anytime the chain ID changes, we just set it to the new chain ID. So we just set this, and then we can do away with this. Remember to unsubscribe in the ng on destroy. So let me quickly do that. Let's call it unsubscribe chain. And it's a subscription. Oh, sorry. Remember, it's not generic, so and then we unsubscribe. So that you avoid memory leaks. So we can save, And now our chain ID is on Ethereum. If I go ahead to change the network here to Arbitrum, everything has changed. This changed, and the chain ID also changed. And I can as well change it from here also. Okay, changed, changed, changed. So any transaction that we carry out or any query we do on the blockchain now will be done on the current chain. Great. So now we've shown you how to connect your Angular app to a Web3 blockchain and EVM blockchain using WAGMI and Web3 model. And we did that by creating a Web3 service. And we showed you how you can initialize the Web3 service and how you can configure your chains and address so that you can always get the currently connected chain and the currently connected wallet address. And then we've shown you how you can display them and how you can make a network switcher. Now let me show you how you can display the native currency balance of a currently connected user. So what we want to do is, instead of this chain ID, we'll replace it with balance. Right. Now let's leave this. And what we're just going to do is that whenever you are connected to a chain, in this method, we will get you a new balance, right? So let's go back to WAGMI, the documentation, to see how we can get a balance. If you check WAGMI, if you check under the actions, you will see that there's a method called fetch balance. Fetch balance allows you to fetch balance information for both the Ethereum or the native chain or ERC20 type tokens. And you can do that by passing in the address of the user. And if you are getting it for an ERC20 token, you also pass in the token address, and you can pass in a chain ID so you can get addresses from other chains. And then you can pass in the units, so ethers or decimal. So you can see here, you are getting the balance for an ERC20 token, and you pass in the address of the wallet that you want to get the balance of, and then the token address also. So this token address might be your USDT or USDC, Matic, BNB, etc. So in our case, we want to fetch balance, and we're going to specify the address. But the address this time around will be the address of the currently subscribed user, which we can get from the Web3 service account. So passing the address, and that's all. If we are getting the balance of the native currency of whichever chain this user is connected to, we don't need to specify any other option. So fetch balance returns a promise, so we can make this async, or we just use this. We then update the balance to be so you can return the return value from the fetch balance allows you to get the formatted balance, and then you can also see the decimals of the currency, which is usually 18 for most native currencies. You can see the raw value with value, and lastly you can see the symbol. So you can set your balance to formatted. Now, if you notice here, you will see that there's a difference in type. So WAGMI expects that every address field will be in the format 0x and a string. So you can cast this. So let's remove this. And then let's display the balance on our template. So here we'll do balance, and then we'll make sure that this only shows if balance is not undefined. So save this. Let's go back to our app. So this is the balance of the account, formatted. We can further format this a little using a number pipe. Yeah. Okay. Let's say we want it to be 8 decimals to 16. Okay, great. Now we can also display this symbol by doing this. So instead of balance being just the formatted balance, we're going to set balance to formatted, and then symbol so let's save that, and then here the balance dot formatted balance dot symbol. Yes, so you can see. So that's how to show balance. And you can do the same thing with an ERC20 type token. All you need to do differently is to specify the token address. You can get the address from the Block Explorer or anywhere else. So that's how to easily get balance using WAGMI in your Angular app.